Good evening. All right. It's great to be in Germantown. Good to see everybody. We are excited to begin. Our goal here is to be done at 8:45 so that we can get the chairs cleaned up and fulfill our commitment to the Recreation Department staff. So hopefully we can all abide by that and be mindful of that as we move through. So we're going to try to be very brief in my introductory comments, my colleagues saying hello, and then we're going to turn to a quick presentation from the planning department so we can understand what we're here to talk about for those who have not gone through the full document. And then we will be here for what we're really here for, which is to listen to you and to hear from you and to understand your concerns. I am Andrew Friedson. I currently serve as the president of the Montgomery County Council, serving in a one-year term in that role. I'm on my second term on the county council. In general, I also serve as chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. I am joined tonight by the district council member for Germantown, Councilmember Marilyn Balcom, who was just named the champion of the Western County at Poolsville Day, so just wanted to note that, by the Fair Access Committee. Also joined by Councilmember Sidney Katz, who represents Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Washington Grove, I should say, most of the municipal limits of both. That's pretty much entirely the district these days. It was different before. Also wanted to acknowledge that Kristen Tribble is here from Councilmember Albernaz's office. We have Hannah Wilcove, who's here from Councilmember Glass's office. We have Planning Board Chair Harris. Artie Harris is here. You're going to hear from him in a minute. Planning Director Jason Sartori is here. You're going to hear from him because he's going to present a relatively brief slideshow. On my team, I have Cindy Gibson and Angela Gear, who are here. The entire team, Balcom, I think, is here. I did want to note that Councilmember Dawn Lukey is on her way. She is running a little bit late because she's attending to her council district responsibilities on a Zoom call meeting in response to some of the very challenging events that happened over the weekend in Montgomery Village. So I just wanted to note and acknowledge that. She will be here very shortly, but just wanted to note that. Also wanted to acknowledge that Claire Isley is here, I believe, from the County Executive's Office. Claire's here. Thank you for joining us. And I believe Ruben Rosario from the Up County Regional Service Center and some of his colleagues are here as well. I believe Ruben is on his way if he's not here already. So we appreciate you joining us as well. Just want to go through the purpose of tonight's meeting to level set expectations. You're going to hear from the planning board chair briefly and from the planning director. Just want to acknowledge we do not have legislation that is before us currently. We have recommendations that came forward from the planning department. We are doing an unprecedented level of public outreach prior to any legislation being before us. We had the planning department brief the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee over the summer in 3 briefings based on their recommendations, and now we're undertaking listening sessions, which I felt and the council agreed was very important for us to understand the questions, comments, and concerns that community members have. We've had several already in other communities around the county. We'll have another one on Wednesday at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, and then a virtual meeting on October 7th. I will say up to this point, we've been very pleased with the variety of viewpoints that have been shared at these listening sessions. We have council staff here. Livu Nadeau, I believe, is in the back, who's our land use attorney. She is taking notes, so we're going to take down every question that gets asked tonight. If you don't get a chance to ask your question or you have follow-up questions or comments, you can follow up and reach out to us as well after tonight's meeting. But even if we don't respond immediately to every concern tonight, because we're mostly here to listen, your questions, comments, and concerns will be part of the summary as part of these listening sessions that will be formally presented to the council during a council session that will be part of our discussion and deliberation as we consider what, if any, legislative proposals based on the recommendations will be introduced. There's no timeline on that introduction. I know there's been a lot of conflation. There was a news report that was based on misinformation. that a vote was taking place in October. That isn't even possible. We don't even have legislation introduced that we could vote on yet. So there is not going to be a vote in October. And so I just want to make sure that I level set those expectations. We're here to hear from you. The housing challenge is a very serious one. Some have asked, why don't we do something else? I could sit here for the 2 hours and talk about all of the things that we have been doing over the last several years and continue to do at the council to address the housing challenges that we face. We are doing a lot. I'm not going to go into detail on that, although I'd love to follow up with anybody who has questions on some of the things that we are doing, including some significant innovations that are being modeled in other places across the state and throughout the country, which I think we all should be very proud of. But the recommendations you'll hear is whether or not we should be doing as much as we can and whether or not this could be, or some aspect of these recommendations could be, another tool in the toolkit of how we address some of the housing challenges that we face. Lots of room for conversation and discussion. There is, again, no legislation currently before us, but we do have a real housing challenge that we have been trying to address in a variety of ways, in the reality that there is not a single person who grew up in Montgomery County who, with the exact same job as their parent or parents, could afford to live anywhere near the same house as their parent or parents. That's true of every street, that's true of every neighborhood, that's true of every community, and it is a real challenge that we have to grapple with. Exactly how to do it, exactly what to do in order to address it. There, again, is room for discussion and conversation, I'm sure some of which we're here tonight. I appreciate up to this point we've had very civil conversations, and I hope that and expect that that will continue tonight, and so appreciate your indulgence in that. With that, let me briefly turn it over to my colleagues, starting with the District Councilmember, Councilmember Balcom, and then Councilmember Katz, if he wants to offer some greetings, then we'll turn it over to the Planning Board Chair.
Thank you, and welcome to Germantown. It's I'm your council member for this district, and the Up County is so big and wonderful and vast. We actually have 3 council members that cover the Up County with Councilmember Katz and Councilmember Lutke. And Council President is correct in terms of the attainable housing. My daughter was born and raised here. She went to school, Kingsview Middle right next door, graduated from Northwest High School. She's 30 years old, and the idea of her being able to buy a house in this community is not attainable at this point in time. So we are actively looking at what we can do for this housing. What are we going to do in the future to change that and make housing more attainable? So we're here to listen, so I'm going to stop right there. And it's so nice to see familiar faces, but just as nice to see new faces. I'm glad that you're here and involved and engaged, so thank you.
Thank you. It's always my goal to be the briefest speaker here, and I think I'm going to be able to do that. I'm Sidney Katz. I represent the 3rd District, which, as was noted, is the municipal boundaries, about 90% of which is the municipal boundaries of Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Washington Grove, all of whom have their own planning and zoning authority. So this plan, though it's extremely important to all of us, and every council member votes for every item that's in Montgomery County, this plan really does not directly go into, except that maybe 10% of the 3rd District. We are here because we are extremely concerned. We are here literally to hear you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the Planning Board Chair. I should have in the beginning, we have translation services available, and so before we get to the presentation, I want to make sure that we offer it. If there's anybody here who requires translation services, please raise your hand.
Si hay alguna persona que necesite interpretación en español, estamos disponibles en la parte de atrás para poderles dar el aparato para que puedan escuchar la interpretación simultánea. Gracias.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Council President Friedson. I'm Artie Harris. I'm Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Thank to all of you for coming out tonight. We really are here to hear your voices. The Planning Board is an independent agency within the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission called MNCPPC. The planning board members are appointed by the council. The planning board incorporates community input and the expertise of Montgomery Planning and Montgomery Parks to make independent decisions and informed decisions that will enhance the quality of life for all that live in the county. We're guided by our new general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. A core theme is more housing of all types for all people in the county. In June, the board approved and transmitted to County Council the Attainable Housing Strategies. As Council President Friedson said, it's just one of the tools we can use to help address a big housing shortage in our county. We're not building enough housing fast enough to keep pace with the demand or anticipated growth in the county. This crisis threatens our economic viability and quality of life. Our missing middle in the county is shrinking. 26,000 middle-income earners have left the county since 2005. They are moving out of the county to places with more affordable and attainable housing, or families aren't just moving here at all. This includes teachers, firefighters, nurses, and even our own children and grandchildren who want to build their careers and start families in Montgomery County, but can't find housing here, and we can do better. Attainable housing strategies alone won't solve our housing problems, but can help by allowing more flexibility to build more housing, and specifically more types of housing along our county's growth corridors. These proposals address the county's urgent need for housing, especially for people and families who have too much income to qualify for affordable programs, but still struggle to afford to live in Montgomery County. To be clear, this is not a mandate for people to turn their properties into duplexes. It would simply provide property owners a path to build something else aligned with the community's existing character and give more people options to stay in Montgomery County. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Director Jason Sartori. He's going to walk through a slideshow presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Jordan is going to be walking around with the microphone, and so when you have your questions, you'll be able to raise your hand and ask them at that time. But let me turn it over to Jason.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm Jason Sartori. Maybe I'll stand over here. I'm the county's planning director, and before I begin and talk about attainable housing strategies, I thought I'd share my own personal housing story. And I encourage you, as you ask your questions or make your comments, to the extent you feel comfortable, go ahead and share your housing story as well. So as an adult, I've lived in two different garden-style apartments, one outside of Richmond and one outside of Providence, Rhode Island. I then lived in a small apartment building that had 6 apartment units in Somerville, Massachusetts. Before my wife and I moved to Baltimore, we lived in downtown Baltimore in a high-rise apartment rental there for a year. And then we moved to Silver Spring in 2002 to a townhouse that we bought near the Forest Glen Metro Station. In 2009, we moved to the single-family detached home that we own today, still in Bethesda. And even before, for the first 5 years of my life, I lived in 2 different accessory dwelling units with my parents in New York. So my story, at different stages of my life, like most of you, I've lived in different types of housing. And this project is really about trying to create more opportunities to get more diverse types of housing here in Montgomery County. So, I want to start from the beginning. Why did we start this project? Well, we actually started this over 3.5 years ago. In March of 2021, we received at the planning board and the planning department received a request from the county council to take a look at and consider zoning reforms that would allow greater opportunities for missing middle housing in Montgomery County. Attainable Housing Strategies, the project that we're talking about today, is the result of that letter. And if you looked at the letter, it actually suggested that we should get our recommendations to the council within a couple of months. But it took us a little over 3 years to get our recommendations, and that extra time afforded us more time to do more research, to talk to more folks from other jurisdictions who are doing similar work, to engage the community in more ways. And so we feel pretty good about the recommendations that we sent along, but we recognize that there's still a lot more engagement and conversation that needs to take place around this. So when we did start, we set out 3 primary goals for the effort. The first was to increase opportunities to meet the county's diverse housing supply needs. And if you look at the housing stock that we have, it's largely single-family detached and multifamily high-rise apartments. We don't have a lot that's in that middle, and as Chair Harris mentioned, we're losing 26,000. We've lost 26,000 middle-income people in Montgomery County over the past 2 decades or so. This is an attempt to try to get more diverse housing to be able to provide more for that those people. The second was to unravel the exclusionary aspects of the county's single-family residential zones. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then the last was to create more opportunities for homeownership for more households in more parts of the county. So why are we doing it now? And first, what's not on here is we still had the obligation to fulfill the request of the county council. On top of that, about 2 years ago, the county council approved Thrive Montgomery 2050, which is our new general plan. It creates the framework and policy guidance for us to diversify our housing stock. Now, Thrive is not the first official document that the county had that called for this. In fact, in 2011, we adopted our housing element to our old general plan. This was a requirement that the state had. And in that housing element, we use very similar language about trying to diversify our housing stock. So we've been talking about this concept since 2011. Second, many jurisdictions, including some of our own neighbors, Prince George's is starting to talk about this. Arlington County's talked about this and has made some changes. But other jurisdictions all across the country, states, small municipalities, counties, from California to Massachusetts, Montana to Oklahoma, Texas, North Carolina, all across the country are doing exactly what we're talking about doing here. Third, the county has a significant housing supply issue, and I'll talk about the impact of that in a bit. And then lastly, this is just the right thing to do. There is a real significant equity component to the work that we're doing here. Now, Montgomery Planning acknowledges the roles that our past plans and policies from decades and generations ago have played in the segregation that we still see in Montgomery County today. Everything we do, not just at the planning department, but also at the council, we take an equity lens to now. And Attainable Housing Strategies gives us an opportunity to be able to break down barriers and create more opportunities for historically disadvantaged communities in Montgomery County to be able to become homeowners. I want to dig down a little bit deeper on this because this is something we've been hearing a lot of questions about. So, restrictive single-family zoning has an origin based in racism. Now, let me explain. So, when things like redlining and racial covenants became illegal, communities all across the country started moving towards adopting single-family zoning. And the purpose, the intent of that was to maintain communities as they were. Now, as our neighborhoods become more and more restrictive or exclusive, the households that are able to purchase homes in those communities, and I'll show some data on this, are increasingly ones who are wealthy or have generational wealth. When you look at who has generational wealth, it's people who, in our country, have had generations of people who have owned properties, who have owned homes. And here in Montgomery County, as across much of the country, there's a disparate difference between who owns home and who haven't. Even just last year, 2023, 75% of white households in Montgomery County were homeowners. Only 44% of black households in Montgomery County were homeowners. And so what Attainable Housing is attempting to do is reverse some of those trends and create more opportunities by doing two things. One, increasing supply of housing in our restrictive single-family neighborhoods. The idea is if you have restrictive supply and an increase in demand, prices go up. And I'm going to show some data that show the impact of our prices, our home prices. The other is by creating more housing that is smaller units. Smaller units are lower priced. So I'm going to show some data on that. This shows you the average single-family detached home size. So those built in the 1950s average today about 1,567 square feet, whereas the ones that are built this decade, 3,867. And what we're seeing in a lot of places across the county are old homes like this are being torn down and being replaced with new single-family homes because that's the only thing you can build in their place today that are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times larger than the one that they're replacing. So what does that mean in terms of pricing? First, in 2023, the average single-family detached home in Montgomery County sold for $970,000. In contrast, attached homes, condos and townhouses sold on average for $440,000. So now I'm going to show the distribution of these. These are actual home sales from 2023 in Montgomery County. The blue bars, these are all of the single-family home sales, and you can see they're on the far end here of the spectrum. When we add in attached, these are those condos and townhouses. You can see they're starting to come down. The largest percentage is here in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. And then when you add in condos and co-ops, it's the red. The largest is in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. So you can see the impact that size of a unit has on the price of the home. So I've mentioned that our neighborhoods are becoming more and more exclusive, and President Friedson mentioned this as well. So this is the 20841 zip code nearby, Boyd's. What this is showing you is the typical home from the year 2000 in this zip code. If you inflated it to 2022 dollars, the price of that home today would be $518,000. However, the typical home in Boyd's today, and I say today, but it's 2022, that's the data we have, was $822,000. So what does that mean in terms of how much income do you need in order to afford the typical home from 2000 in this zip code? You need $115,000 a year household income. But to afford the actual typical home in Boyd's today, you need $183,000 in income. So what does that mean in terms of who can afford to live and buy the typical home in Boyd's? 51%, just over half of the county's households today could afford to live in Boyd's in 2000. But in reality, it's less than 1/3. 32% of county households, not this isn't Boyd's, the county households can afford to live in Boyd's today. We're seeing this trend happen in every single neighborhood, every single zip code. The price of housing has increased faster than incomes, faster than everything else has inflated. And the result is fewer and fewer people can live in every single-family neighborhood in the county. So how can we reverse that trend? That's the point of this effort. So I just want to show this. This is on the right. This is what you can do today. In the single-family zones that we're talking about, 1/3 of the county, you can tear down a single-family home and you could build this in its place. But you can't build the building on the right. It's identical size, massing, same setback from the road, same setback from the neighbors, from the neighboring properties, same height, same lot coverage, but you can't build it because it's actually 2 units. Of course, this is just a photoshopped image of the same building, but you can't build that. You can build this. So I'll explain what the recommendations include, but first some maps to show you some geographies here. When we're talking about where this would apply, the recommendations, it's in all the areas you see that are yellow, and there are different recommendations for the different shades of yellow here, but it's 4 zones, the R40, R60, R90, and R200 zones. As you increase the number, you get further and further out from the core of the down county and our corridors going up.
Potomac in that area also.
There's parts of Potomac here, yeah. Okay, the other thing you'll hear me talk about is the Thrive Montgomery 2050 growth corridors. These were not recommendations from Attainable Housing. These are the the growth corridors that were identified in Thrive as the areas where over the next couple of decades we want to be focusing our growth as a county. So it's all of these corridors that you see here. Here's where they appear on a map. And lastly, this is the priority housing district. This is an attainable housing recommendation. It's a combination of the last two. So all the areas in blue, they follow those corridors that I showed on the last map. It's a 1 mile buffer from all of our Metro line, Purple line, and MARC rail line stations, and a 500-foot buffer from all of those corridors. So everything that fell within those 4 zones and within these buffered areas appear in blue. That's what we were referring to through our recommendations here as the priority housing district. And I'll talk about what that means.
Could you let them know that they'll also be able to get a copy of these?
Oh, yes, sure. Yeah. So at the end, it was on in the front screen, but at the end I'll put up a QR code. You'll be able to scan that, and you can download a copy of this presentation as well.
More detailed map that actually shows the road.
Yeah. So and there is at the end there's a web address that I show. From there you can get to a very detailed. You can zoom in. It's a dynamic map that you can see where all of these different. You turn on the different layers and see how it applies to different parts of the county. Okay, so the recommendations come at 3 different scales with 3 different approaches and 3 different geographic areas. The small scale, now, this is kind of small to read, so I'll just give you the highlights. What we're talking about here are duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes that would be required to stay within the existing development standards that we apply to a single-family home. So the same height limit, same lot coverage limit, same setback from the neighboring properties and from the road requirements. The way this would apply in the R40, R60, and R90 zones, those 3 zones, duplexes and triplexes would be allowed everywhere under the recommendations from the Planning Board. Quadplexes, a 4-plex, would be allowed in that priority housing district. In the R200 zone, which we see more of up here, that's where duplexes would be allowed everywhere, but triplexes and quadplexes would only be allowed under the board's recommendation in the priority housing district. The key thing here is that these things would be allowed by right. So just like that image of the 2 different houses I showed you, you could build the house on the left by right. Just go to the Department of Permitting Services. You can get a demolition permit and you can get a building permit and you could build that house. You can't do that with the one on the right. Under this recommendation, you'd be able to do that, but with one caveat. It would have to be consistent with what we're recommending is a pattern book. The pattern book will be a visual representation of the zoning requirements and standards. So we're talking about the massing, how it would, the size of the building and how it relates to the property, certain neighborly house details, things like porches and patios or sunrooms, and how you can accommodate them if desired, how you accommodate on-site parking, how you would place the building on the lot, and then how it communicates with the street frontage. And the way this pattern book would work is there'd be a bunch of different examples or options for different size lots, different configuration lots in each of the different zones. Oh. The second was the medium scale. Here, we're focused on our corridors. The recommendation is for slightly larger buildings, things like stacked flats, which are also called 2-over-2s, where you might have a unit that's 2 stories on top of another unit that's 2 stories. This would only apply in the R60 and R90 zones, and it would only apply within 500 feet of a corridor. And here, it would require more extensive review. This is not something you can do by right. You can't just go to the Department of Permitting Services. It would require a review by county agencies and potentially even the Planning Board through what we call the Attainable Housing Optional Method. We have other optional methods of development that we already have today. Essentially, it's where a property owner can get increased density in exchange for a public benefit. In this case, the public benefit is smaller units. So the requirement here is that the average unit that you build through this can be no more than 1,500 square feet. So you can have an 1,800 square foot unit, but that has to be offset with like a 1,200 square foot unit. So it gets a variety of different housing sizes and types. And then lastly, there's the large scale. This is where we really focus in on specific areas along corridors, those thrive growth corridors where we want to kind of transform and have a different vision for how those corridors function, because they are transit heavy, they're walkable, they are have bicycle facilities and other things like that, and where you've got a mix of uses. And so this is something, our recommendation here is that there would be a new set of zones that would be created. They don't exist today, and then through a master plan process, they could be applied to certain parts of the corridors. Two last things I want to highlight. The first is, along with the priority housing district, the planning board recommended potential reductions in parking requirements. So if you're outside the priority housing district and there's no street parking present, there would be no reduction under the board's recommendations in the parking requirements. So every type of unit today has a certain number of parking units that are required on site, so off the street. If you were building a duplex, you would have to do 2 spaces per unit, so you'd have to build 4 in that situation, on-site parking spaces. If there is street parking, then there would be a 50% reduction recommended, which would be only 2 spaces. If you're inside that priority housing district, that blue area on that map, and there is no street parking, then it would be a 50% reduction, so 2. If there is street parking present, then it's a 75% reduction, which means the duplex would only require 1 space, minimum. You could build more if you believe that that's what's needed. And the last thing I want to highlight, President Friedson mentioned this. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I just want to highlight, because we hear a lot about, well, this isn't affordable housing. What are you doing about affordable housing? There are a lot of different things that the county has in place or is working on, and this is just a sample, and there's more that is always under consideration of different housing programs that we have here in the county for different levels of affordability. So I just want to highlight that this is one thing. We just say that this is one tool in our toolbox to try to tackle the housing crisis that we have. It's focused on a certain element, and it's trying to open up and create more opportunities for homeownership. We have all these other programs that are already in place working for other levels of affordability. So lastly, our listening sessions, as was mentioned earlier, we've got 2 more, one in Bethesda Chevy Chase High School on September 25th, that's Wednesday, and then next week a virtual one on Tuesday during the day. And one other event I wanted to highlight, we've been having a housing panel. The planning board's been hosting a panel, and we had one last week. On October 17th, we have our last in this series. This one is going to bring practitioners who have been doing this type of work across the country to talk about how it works, where they've had complications, how they've been able to make it work. So it's been a good series, and you can come in person to our Wheaton headquarters, or you can come, you can watch it online. And then lastly, here's that QR code where you can get a copy of this presentation and other contact information in the website where you can get the map. So.
Also, if you signed in, we'll be sending all the registrants, and anybody who signs in here will be sending you the information as well via email. So use the QR code. Also, if you haven't signed in, please do so. The purpose of that is so that we can send you the information after the meeting. With that, we're ready to open up to questions, which is why we're here. Jordan's going to come around, and we just ask in the interest of time that you try to make it a question or a comment, and you try to keep it to around 30 seconds.
Great, thank you, Council President. I saw your hand up. I'll hold this for you. You can stand and say where you're from in the county and your name, if that's possible. You could just step on back here.
Sure. Oh, thank you. My name is Susan Scott, and I live in East Village in Montgomery Village. I actually, looking at your map, I don't think this applies to me, but I just want to understand something. I live about 7 miles from the metro, but I have friends who live in about a mile from the metro, and they have single-family homes. Is it possible under this proposal that my neighbor's house could be sold? Somebody would tear that house down and build a triplex or quadplex on that property, and their neighbor could do it on the opposite side too. So basically they would be surrounded by tri or quadplexes. That's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond?
Sure. It depends on the exact location where you fall in that map, but that's potentially, there are places where that could definitely happen. We also don't anticipate, so a few years back, the county loosened the accessory dwelling unit restrictions that we had. And people were concerned that it meant that every single house was now going to have an accessory dwelling unit. And we've seen a doubling in the number of ADUs that are built in the county, but it's been something that's kind of a slow progress, and we anticipate that it would be something similar.
And just for the interest of numbers, I think it is important that we talk about it. Do you want to just say the number of, essentially the small scale at least is really about what happens if a house is torn down on a single family lot, of what could be built in its place. That's really at the heart of what the recommendation from the planning department is, certainly the small scale aspect. There's about 200 a year countywide. That's out of 180,000 total units that we're talking about. So 200 out of 180,000 units, even if that number were to go up quite a bit, the proliferation question and concern there is, it would have to go up many times, exponentially many times, in order for that to hit that level, of proliferation. I just think that the scope and scale here is important to at least, be understood.
And one other thing I want to also remind, that they would be required to build within the existing standards under the board's recommendations. So they couldn't build a house higher than they could build a single-family home today. They couldn't build it larger or have more lot coverage than they could today with a single-family home. So in what we have found through our analysis on this is the likelihood is that this won't increase the likelihood that homes are torn down. What it would do is create more options for homes that are torn down. Instead of just being single-family, they could be duplexes or potentially triplexes.
Great, thank you. A show of hands over here. I did see, I'll hold this for you. We're going to make our way around everybody, so just bear with me. If you can stand, I'll hold this for you, and your name and what part of the county you live in.
Hi, my name is Ogechi. I'm here with Action in Montgomery. I live in Montgomery Village. I wanted to give a personal comment. As someone that lives with her family now, I used to work for the county, and at that time I could not afford to even rent an apartment, let alone get a house. I'm 36 now, live with my husband. Our lease was up, and we decided to move back with my family for many reasons, because our lease was going to be more than what it would be for a mortgage, and still with our joint income, we couldn't afford to live together. My parents are aging, and as many people that are older millennials know, for me, culturally, it's important to be able to live in a multi-generational home, to care for my mom and my dad with a stroke, and to hopefully have a child. And this option of having a bigger space is beautiful. There's so many apartments that are being built and condos that are being built that are less than that 1,500. And I do agree that some people might be fearful of neighbors, but having worked with tenants that have 2-3 families living in a condo, it's the same amount of neighbors, but this time more space, more dignity, and the ability for us millennials to grow families in not a 700 square foot apartment that costs $3,000, but a 1,500 square foot 2-flat that hopefully also costs a decent amount of money. So thank you for listening.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to make our way around the room. I see a hand up over here. Give me a second to literally run all the way over here. Yeah, you can stand. I had my eye on you. I'll hold this for you. You can say your name and what part of the county you live in, okay? Thank you. I'll hold that.
All right. Thank you very much. My name's Amanda Dalton, and I live in Milestone Apartments 20876. I was homeless 2008 through 2000. Sorry, I hope you'll excuse me. I do have a disability which sometimes causes my mouth not to agree with my brain. Anyway, I was homeless for a great deal of time, and my only option after that point was to rent rooms in other people's homes. I have a college degree. I was working 4 jobs. 4. One of which was highly technical. I actually did some of the video at one point for the county. I was one of those people in the control room there. Anyway, to make this brief, I want to say that I'm very grateful for the hard work that's happening, both with the planning board and with the county council. They are working tremendously hard on this issue. I want to also say that until I got my Section 8 housing voucher, I was in danger of being on the street. So please consider that the attainable housing increases the overall supply. Those, for example, if I were still living in other people's houses, I might actually be able to rent more than just a room from somebody who has a property here in the county. So I'll wrap up with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. A show of hands, okay. See a gentleman here. You can go ahead and stand. I'll hold this for you. Did you mind stepping up? If not, I can just come right here. It's up to you. Thank you. I'll hold this for you. Your name and where you live in the county.
Yep, my name is Bill Ott. I live in Montgomery Village now, but I started out in Pittsburgh, lived in 2 different apartments after I was married there. And then we came here, lived in an apartment, Londonderry Apartments. I was pioneer in Montgomery Village 56 years ago. So I've been here for a while. I hope you won't discount what I have to say. I heard a couple things here. One of the last things you said was sort of to the effect, my business is trying to figure out how to get more people into Montgomery County. Affordable, accessible housing. That's your job as you see it. Bring more people in. I think the better job for the county council when they wake up in the morning and say, what am I working for today? It's to maintain the quality of life for the citizens of Montgomery County and improve the quality of life. That should be number one. If you're working on safety and security, whether you're working on education, whether you're doing transportation issues, zoning issues, it should always be focused on, am I improving or at least maintaining the quality of life for the people who are paying my salary? I mean, you guys, Montgomery County, are working for the people, the citizens of Montgomery County. So if you come across a proposal that does not maintain the quality of life for the people who are already here, invest it in Montgomery County, in their homes, with their family that lives nearby, in their homes. That should be number one. It shouldn't be about some mysterious bunch of people who are saying, oh, I can't buy a house. I'm 30 years old and I can't buy a house. I couldn't either until I was 36 years old. And that's how it is with my children as well. You get there. You invest in apartments, townhouse, you move your way up. Everybody here can say the same thing. Also, I'd like to say there's a shortage of single-family homes. In Montgomery Village, where I live, a house goes on sale, we're talking $600,000, $700,000, 6 offers within a week. One of my neighbors tried to move off my street into Germantown. He had to make 3 offers. By that time, his house in Montgomery Village was sold, but he couldn't buy one in Germantown fast enough. The price kept going up. So it's not only a shortage of affordable, accessible, there's a shortage of single-family homes. And I happened to listen to the Wheaton presentation. A lot of people live in Aspen Hill. They live along Veers Mill Road, places like that, where you have beginner homes. We considered moving there when we first came here in 1968. They are beginner homes, and they're going to be the first ones that somebody comes through, tears down, and builds a duplex at least twice the cost. Because it'll be a new building with new kitchens, new windows, everything, new air conditioning, new furnace, new roof. That's not going to be affordable. And what have you managed to do? You managed to get rid of affordable housing all around that county, Wheaton, Rockville, even out here in the western suburbs, we have those affordable homes. I think you've got to look at what you already have and not decide to to just destroy, in a way, destroy our neighborhoods, as the lady over here said. We got duplexes on either side of the house. What happened to my investment?
Thank you. Thank you for that, okay? I did see a hand raised here for a while, and I'll make my way back, okay? How you doing, sir? I'll hold this for you, okay? Your name and where you live in the county.
My name's Jason, and I live in Germantown in the Waters Landing neighborhood. I also grew up in Germantown in the Waters Landing neighborhood, and I bought a home there in 2022. I just wanted to invite, especially the down county, planning board people and council members to just walk through my neighborhood. As you'll see, the planning in the up county is different. Like my HOA, just a single HOA in Waters Landing, it has condominiums that go for well under $400,000, even under $300,000. It has smaller townhomes that are about 1,200 square feet, larger townhomes that are 1,800 square feet. It has small single-family homes and then that are about 1,500 square feet, and then larger single-family homes. So what I'm saying is this middle does exist in Germantown and in the up county. It might not exist in Potomac or Silver Spring or something like that, where people are tearing down homes to build mini mansions. But this attainable housing strategy is describing a down county problem. It's a down county solution to a down county problem. And the up county gets left behind constantly and not considered, because also the least dense housing is the furthest away from amenities. And that's what this affects. I'm 2 miles from a grocery store, 3 miles from Mark. I'm 7 miles from the Great Seneca Transitway, and I'm 10 miles from Shady Grove. So like we're just living in a different reality. Also, the price points that you're quoting, I live in a larger single family home in my community. Homes go for between $600,000 and $700,000. They don't go for $900,000. There has never been a single family home or property that I'm aware of that's gone for $1 million in Germantown. And we're probably still a couple years away. So this is just a completely different reality from the one you're describing. We're not ready with the infrastructure here for this. We're not ready for the market conditions for this, because you're not stopping developer money either from going in and just jacking up the price of overall housing, because it's a green flag opportunity for them to redevelop and get money out of the housing market. You need to stop housing being seen as an investment and as it fulfilling a need for shelter. And if you don't solve that, which this definitely does not, makes the problem worse, you're not going to even start to solve the housing crisis.
Thank you.
Just so you know, I have been to Waters Landing. It's a great community. I'm happy to come back, and Councilmember Balco does a great job representing it. Do you want to just speak to where this impacts and why the decision was not to focus just on one part of the county? Because I mean that was at the heart of the question, is why not focus this down county versus up county, where there are different housing dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was that we did want uniformity. We wanted, in terms of not to single out any particular neighborhood and say, you're the one that is responsible to take this on, or however. The focus on the corridors, where you've mentioned that if you don't have a corridor, then we're not doing the more, that we're not recommending the more, the higher density. The other thing, I think, you've, in some ways, you kind of made part of the point where I showed the size of a unit really has an impact. The smaller, the condos, the co-ops, the townhouses, the 1,800 square foot townhouse, compared to a lot of the new townhouses that we are seeing in down county and other places across the county, 3,000 square foot townhouses. So the ability to be able to have more that are smaller, I think, is helpful. And there are good communities here and other places around the county that we could point to as evidence of how this does work.
Great, thank you so much. So I did see this lady's hand up. If you don't mind, if you're able to stand, just so we don't have pushback from the podium, we'll stand right here, all right? And I'll hold this for you.
I have more question. Well, one statement had to do with the duplex picture that you drew, and you showed the way it is now, the way it could be. And I noticed in the way it could be, there were no more garages, which my big concern is the county is loaded with cars, and I just see more cars being out there, and I'm not sure how that gets addressed. My other question is, in HOA, I don't know if those are what you're referring to as restrictive communities, HOA-governed communities, but how does that impact? I mean, I live in Milestone, the single-family houses, and even though somebody could build something comparable in an HOA community, can you simply knock down a house and put a duplex in there, or is this applying to non-HOA communities?
It's a good question. So when I'm referring to restrictive single-family zoning, it's just this idea that the only thing you can build is a single-family home. You don't have choice or options. In terms of HOAs sit on top of all of that. So an HOA could have restrictions that, say you can't have a particular colored door, or you can't put up a fence, or you can't install a pool, or that's all on top of existing zoning. And so those would still apply. And in some cases, you might have HOAs that say it can only be single-family homes.
Could I just clarify? So an HOA is based on a covenant. The covenant is on each property. The covenant is governed by contract law. So just so we can all understand, the county, our land use authority, does not go into contract law. So we can set zoning laws, we can set zoning codes, but a contract between private entities, which is essentially between a homeowner and the association that governs the community, that is not something that the county council has authority over. Having said that, there have been legislation introduced at the state level to look at what HOAs should or should not be able to dictate based on covenants. And that is governed by state law, because contract law is a state law issue, not a county law issue. So the answer is we have no control over what an HOA does or doesn't do. The state does, and as we're having this conversation on this set of proposals, there have been a number of proposals at the state level, and one of the focuses at the state level is what restrictive authority HOAs, municipal governments, and even county governments should have that has led to the restriction of housing over time. That's part of the broad conversation that's happening and part of the environment that we're in. And so I just want to make sure we were clear about that there's nothing in the recommendations that would have anything directly tied to HOAs or something that the county council could really do one way or another related to HOAs, but there are a series of other efforts, whether they are approved or not, whether they go through the General Assembly or not, that are being addressed at the state level.
Great.
Yes, because an HOA governance is based on a covenant, which is a contract, state law could always impact what HOAs can and can't do. So anything your association is able to do under contract law, just like any other contract, the state law, which is what governs any contract between private parties, you enter into a contract in a state based on the laws of that state, and those laws could change. That's the same reason where much of the requirements in real estate transactions happen. Those contractual requirements generally are governed under state law.
Great.
Parking is something that we've heard a lot. The question.
Wait a minute. We're gonna
move
calm
on.
down.
The question. I'm going to repeat the question. The question was about parking that she had asked earlier. Parking is something that we've heard from a lot of people, as you can imagine, and is something that we are, going to be looking into, and is going to be part of the conversation as we figure out what ultimately the county council is going to do. But
Great,
certainly
thank you.
we hear your concern, and it's something that we've heard from a lot of folks. Want to acknowledge that Councilmember Dawn Lukey has joined us as well. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Council President. Again, if we can just limit to about 30 seconds, one comment, question per person, okay? I did see your hand raised over here for a while. Go ahead and stand. I'll hold this for you, okay? Your name and where you're from in the county.
Okie dokie. My name is Susan Baker, and I live in the Brighton Village Apartments on the other side of 270, where the cows used to be. Okay, I got a bazillion things here, but I want to shout out the woman over there who's in HOA now, because first off, congratulations on security, but I'm really sorry for you that you're in that situation. Since 1990, I've been dealing with Lyme disease. I was treated right away, told I was cured, lost my abilities. I'm a graphic designer and an illustrator. I have not been able to find a job in Montgomery County since 2014. The jobs all need either security or they need high education for the various government agencies around here. We have more medical stuff around here that requires incredible education, which leaves me out. So I've been in my apartment. I've been having problems with paying rent because with the Lyme disease, I lost everything. I've been told I'm cured. There's no cure except ivermectin, which I'm now getting, and I can't tell you how awesome it is. I want to tell you that I grew up in Bethesda. I can't afford to buy in Bethesda. You're sitting here and talking, and I'm going, well, if I want to live in Martha's Vineyard, can we put something up there so I can live in Martha's Vineyard? I don't have the wherewithal for Martha's Vineyard, so why should I demand that I live there? Everything got screwed up in Montgomery County when all of the jobs left. Lockheed Martin doesn't have the presence it used to. We've lost stores. Lake Forest Mall was completely destroyed by social issues, and it just keeps going. We have to build up the county. We have to bring back the quality of life in the county. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're working hard on the economic development side too. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details of some of the things that we've done, but we've made historic investments in some new economic development programs, some of which I've championed, including a $20 million fund to try to incentivize businesses to invest here, to invest in them. But I don't want to go into too many details. We want to focus on hearing from you, but I appreciate the comment.
And when you speak, can you speak into the mic more? Because
Sure. I will try my best. This is not the best microphone.
And again, we're making our way around the room, okay? So these are people who have their hands up too. I'll hold this for you, your name and where you're living in the county.
Okay, my name is Christopher Nellis. I live in Rockville. As such, I'm 31. What Councilman Freeman said at the very beginning, that people in my generation, they're being kicked out of the communities that they raised in, even if they have a great job, the same job their parents had. I comparably make as much as my father did, and he raised 5 kids with a stay-at-home wife all by himself. And now, if I wanted to do that, I'd have to go all the way up to Frederick. My wife would probably have a job too, got some daycare. I would have to spend an hour and a half commuting to and from, which my math worked out to be 8 days a year just in commuting. This is a great initiative you guys have, and good job you guys. I just have a few concerns about the pattern book you described with the smaller zones. I just want to put in a comment that I understand it. I lived in a quadplex in college, and it blended really nicely with the community it was in. And I understand the point of the parent book. I just wanted to make a comment that I hope that's not too restrictive.
Great. Thank you for that comment. Thank you so much, sir. Yes. I'll hold this for you, your name and where you live in the county, okay?
Hi. My name is David Fagan. I live in Clarksburg, Aurora Hills. I'm here as a citizen. Also, I'm on the NAACP for Montgomery County. I want to ask a question specifically about the program itself. You've talked about property owners doing X, Y, and Z on their property. Are you envisioning property owners becoming developers now, actually doing this? And the reason why I ask is because I would like to know who the players are going to be in these developments. Are we going to have primarily general contractors, developers coming in and buying, building, looking at it like an infill lot? Or are you really going to have people who are owners of their property, like this young lady here who would love to live with her mother and father, being able to do that development on their property? Yeah, that's a possibility, but what do you envision is going to happen And I want to say I'm glad that you're doing this, also that you're bringing in others who have done it elsewhere, because we can find out what the pros and cons that they've experienced having done this. I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of trepidation about, this becoming some kind of, developer's delight. And I don't think that that's what we really want here. We want a community, which we really have a great community here. And I think we want to keep that. And that's just the fears that you're hearing from a lot of people. So I'd like to know, just really quick, what you think are the stakeholders in a development that includes, a house, and they want to do X, Y, and Z, what you're talking about. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's a good question. Our thinking on this is that it would be the same kind of market that we see today for when we're talking about the small scale, the tear down, rebuild market that we currently see, which are the small home builders that are doing that. They're not generally outside investors. They're people who, that's their niche market, is building single homes. We've talked to a few of them. They would be interested in doing things like duplexes or triplexes, and they're not interested in becoming landlords. They're looking at, selling them or just building and selling. They're not massive developers. Like when we talk about a developer who might be building a 200-unit high-rise or a 200-unit single-family neighborhood, this is, they're small home builders. There may also be a market for individuals who say, I want to age in place, and I want to create an opportunity for my children to be able to live, or my son or daughter to live in here while I can stay here, but I don't need, a 5-bedroom house anymore. And so there are other opportunities. It might be individual homeowners who decide to do something with this too.
Yeah, and just to clarify quickly, some of the home builders, as were mentioned, want to do this. Some don't, at least who have shared their views so far as part of this listening process. It's a different product than the one that they have traditionally done. It's obviously more straightforward to build one unit than it is to build multiple. The current tear down market, so to speak, those 200 units countywide, they're fairly concentrated in particular areas of the county currently, mostly inside or right at the Beltway. Generally on the west side of the county. There's a little bit on the east side of the county now, particularly around Silver Spring and part of outer Kensington. The dynamic of that is that there are really two. Sometimes a home builder buys and then builds a lot and sells it as a home, as a current large unit that gets torn down. And sometimes, currently, a homeowner purchases the lot and wants a different unit on that lot and hires a similar home builder as a contractor, and they build it for them. And so I just want to clarify what that, based on the current dynamics of what's out there, there's a home builder that sometimes is speculative and oftentimes is being hired by a property owner to build them a home that they want, that is more desirable than the older, smaller unit that is currently on the site. And if they're spending a certain amount of money, they find it more worthwhile to spend a lot more money to build a new home. I think it's important to note that building of that new unit is extremely expensive. So the economics of that have to make sense for this to work. And I think that's the point of whether it's really about when a house gets torn down, what can be built in its place, is what you heard earlier.
Great, thank you. With a show of hands, I did see some back here, and I'm working my way up back towards the room. I'll hold this for you, okay? You can go ahead and tell me your name and where you live in the county.
Greetings. My name is Kirk D. Carrington II. I live in the Seneca Crossing neighborhood, and here are my concerns. First concern is that there doesn't appear to be a sense of affordability for these new homes that are going to go up. And for the individuals who've spoken thus far, it appears that they are priced out of the ability to purchase a home. My wife and I, we just bought our single family home in the Seneca Crossing area, and we paid upwards of $800K. However, when we were bidding on those homes, it was like 10 bids for every home when we were looking. So that doesn't give me the appearance that people cannot purchase single-family homes in Montgomery County. However, I do understand from the gentleman, the young lady here, and the young lady who's a graphic designer, when you're now talking about the socioeconomic perspective of workforce development, putting resources into neighborhoods so that people can actually truly attain the home, that doesn't seem to be a part of this conversation. So if you build a duplex, because I do have friends who are real estate agents, if you tear down a home and they build a duplex and they spend $1 million to build the duplex, they're going to charge $3 million to live in it, which means in my neighborhood, I'm going to have more people and I'm still going to have a unaffordable home, but now I have to deal with other issues and the equity in my home may go down because of a duplex next to me. How is that being addressed or even considered? Particularly because I believe the council member from Gaithersburg indicated that because he's in a municipality, he won't be affected. So that now leads to another problem that the residents of Germantown, who we are not a municipality, are going to end up dealing with a lot more. I also want to ask a question. Have we compared this to the moderately priced dwelling unit situation that already exists in Montgomery County? Because when you go around particular neighborhoods, it tends to be the moderately priced dwelling units that are not as well maintained or properly kept up. And so the HOAs have a greater issue with those. How are those things being addressed in this plan?
Thank you for that.
So we can respond briefly to that. I want to save most of the time for questions. It's obviously a lot to that question. In terms of the where and Germantown bearing a disproportionate share, I mean, the reality is if you're talking about the likelihood of a tear down, which is really what we're talking about, the age and size of the unit is really a primary factor, as well as the land value and the improvement value. Because Germantown is a newer community compared to older communities in other parts, the likelihood of tear downs here are actually lower, significantly lower than in other parts of the county. I think the interest of the planning board, I don't want to speak for them, but what you heard earlier was that they didn't want to exempt, large parts of the county. They wanted every part of the county to be part of the recommendations that they put forward. We're going to have to decide where we think it should go, but ultimately the Gaithersburg and Rockville have their own zoning, so they will do their own zoning and have done their own zoning, and actually there's quite a bit of duplexes and other variety of housing options, particularly in Gaithersburg, than really there are in the rest of the county. So there's actually more there than there is in the rest of the county, but I just wanted to address that point. In terms of affordability, you heard earlier, you saw on the slideshow, and again, I didn't want to go through all of the various programs, but we have a number of programs related to affordability. I am advocating and hope that we have a lot more programs. In fact, I push for additional funding for first-time home buyers. I push for funding to allow for existing homeowners to have access to funds to be able to make improvements in their homes, to be able to stay in their homes. Most of those programs are limited to the amount of money that's available because there are finite resources. They're also limited to who is eligible. And what this proposal is focused on is the zoning side of this, not the programmatic or the funding side of housing. There's lots of ways to tackle this issue. It's a reasonable conversation for us to have, but the argument here is and not or, and the question is, what should be part of the and how should it be done? But I appreciate the comments and the questions. We'd have to follow up on the MPDU dynamic. I do think that's something we'd have to follow up. We'd have to follow up on in terms of your concerns about the MPDU properties in HOA communities.
Great, thank you, Council President. I am working my way up the room. We did have hands raised. I see your hands up there. I'll hold this for you, okay? And your name and where you live in the county.
My name's Marianne. I live in Durwood, Maryland, and I hate public speaking. I have a concern when somebody said that they were going to kind of assume that people would do the right thing and there'd be limits and people would, if you don't put into the rules and the law all the possibilities, people will push the boundaries. Okay, I know, I'm familiar with Noah's Law, and even as that law that was written had to be amended because it wasn't strong enough. Another thing is I'm very concerned about parking. I happen to live on a circle. I was able to afford a house only because I bought it 35 years ago. People that have to drive tend to be on some of the lower income jobs, the daycare workers, construction workers, people that have to have a vehicle to go from house to house to do their job. So I think it's completely unfair to dismiss and kind of to say, oh, parking will work itself out. Traffic on 270 is not working itself out. Parking in this situation where you're expanding the number of people that live per half-acre lot is not going to fix itself. And economically, I'd like you guys to guess how much a nurse's assistant, a certified nursing assistant, makes at Shady Grove Hospital per hour. So $21 an hour for 12-hour shifts. So please tell me how that person can afford to live in Montgomery County. I'd like to know.
Thank you for that comment. Thank
Part
you.
of the argument is they can. I think that's the question is how best to address that, and there are legitimate concerns. As I mentioned, parking is something that has come up quite a bit, one of the main concerns that we have heard, and something that will be certainly part of the conversation.
Great, thank you, Council President. I am still working my way up. I saw that your hand up here, sir. I'll hold this for you, your name and where you live in the county.
Hi, my name is Robert Passavoy. I actually live up in Germantown, so I have to thank the gentleman for mentioning the town that I live in. I'm a little bit of an unusual case. I live in Germantown. I actually drive a great deal for my job. I'm an engineer, so I go and fix machines at hospitals all over the region. So driving, when she mentioned traffic, I couldn't help but laugh internally, but I didn't want to disrupt anything. I am originally from Chicago. So if you want ideas of how urbanization spreads and the sprawl spreads, this is exactly how it happens. You are correct. There is an important thing about getting housing into this area. However, by doing what you are doing, you will allow developers to come, buy homes, increase the number of housing in those areas, reduce the property values, which causes a ripple effect, letting them buy more houses and blockbust the entire area. I'm not in support of this. I think this is awful. I like the neighborhood I moved into. I escaped Chicago to come here to not deal with this crap. I am not, unfortunately, I've been driving for like 4 hours, so I'm in a terrible mood. I apologize. But Germantown is beautiful. I love Germantown. I love Gaithersburg. I love Rockville. It's better than anything that Illinois could ever dream of having. I understand that you guys want to bring in more tax revenue. I get it. But I don't want my newborn son, who is a month old now, to have to deal with the consequences of an overtaxed police force, overtaxed sanitary problems, overtaxed education system, the consequences of 270, our favorite highway. If we're going to be increasing the number of people who live here, right now, just trying to get to the Damascus exit, to get into the north side of Germantown, is a nightmare every day of the week. So I understand what you're trying to do. The hard part of reality is sometimes we simply cannot help everybody. Not everyone can live in Montgomery County. It's a shame, but we can't accommodate everyone. And people who did move here want their towns to stay the same for their kids and their grandkids. So I don't mean to be callous to the people who are having problems. I get it, it's rough. But the rest of us who have managed to get into these towns, we don't want them to become overcrowded. We don't want the neighborhoods, because I live in a townhome. I live in the high density housing. I get it. I just don't want to live there forever. So I appreciate what you're trying to do and the empathy behind it, but I cannot get behind the reality of it. Too much empathy is pathogenic and it will harm Montgomery County. And there's a lot of harm already.
All right, thank you for that comment. I did see you had your hand up for a while. You can go ahead and stand, and I'll hold this for you, and I'm making my way up there, okay, y'all? All right, I'll hold this in your name and where you live in the county, okay?
My name is Maria Bender. I live in Brookville, which is outside of Olney. And I've been in Montgomery County since I was 6 years old, so many decades. And I wanted to bring up this issue of a crisis. Do we really have a crisis? If you listen to Mark Elrick, he says in the pipeline, we have plenty of houses to accommodate the growth over the next 20 years. You all say something different. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. But I also want to ask, following up to that, is what's going on with the Vitro site that's been empty for decades, Lake Forest Mall, White Flint Mall, those are sitting graveyards. Why aren't we developing those areas? And instead, you'd rather pick on these single-family homes where I've lived in my house for over 35 years. I bought it as a single-family community. It's going to turn to crap if the house on this side becomes a duplex, house on that side becomes a duplex, excuse me. Or, but worse yet, 3 houses get sold and a developer comes in and puts in an apartment building. So can you address what's going on with these empty lots and also office buildings that are sitting empty?
Do you want to speak to the pipeline, and then I can speak to some of the other items? And just to be clear, there's no part of the recommendation where the multiple lots by right in the middle of a neighborhood could be turned into an apartment building. They're the large scale through optional method development, which is a prolonged process with regulatory review that has to go to the planning board, has to get a site plan, and was not proposed for neighborhoods, was proposed, as part of this, as part of the recommendations, which we don't know whether or not will even be taken up, but it was not proposed for neighborhoods. I just want to clarify on that. You want to speak to the pipeline, and then I can speak to the sites. Why don't you go with the pipeline first?
Okay, so we do have about 31,000 unbuilt units in the pipeline. What the pipeline are projects that have received their approval. Those are units that are approved to be built. They just haven't been built yet. The developer for those has not gone and received their building permit to actually begin building them. Some of those have been on there for a long time. I think, what was the percentage that a third have been... A third of the pipeline, so about 10,000 of those units have been on there for more than 10 years. Some of those projects will never move forward. Some of them are, some of the owners have changed hands, the conditions, the market conditions have changed. For whatever reason, they may not happen. And actually, when we looked back 6 years, the pipeline that existed 6 years ago, what percentage of that today has been built? It's 50% across the county, and it varies by different parts of the county. But so some of those won't be built. But the other thing I want to note about that is that the vast majority of those units in the pipeline are multifamily high-rise. And so when we're talking about trying to get a diversity of housing, that is not the diversity that we're trying to achieve with this. This is something different. We still need that pipeline to try to move that along. But this is just creating more options of different types of variety of housing.
Yeah, Lake Forest Malls in the city of Gaithersburg, they have been moving forward and aggressively trying to move that project forward. White Flint is part of the White Flint sector plan. That is something that the county is trying to push. Ultimately, though, even if we were to build out these large sites, it wouldn't meet the full housing need that we have. So it's not an or question, as mentioned. It's being proposed as an and. It's not instead of doing White Flint and Lake Forest and Viva White Oak and some of the large-scale sites, this is being proposed instead. The idea is that we need more options in more places. Again, what we do with these recommendations and how we address that, remains to be seen, but that's at least the concept. So I just want to respond to that.
Thank you for that. Okay, this gentleman here had his hand raised, so I'll hold this for you where you live in the county. Thank you.
Okay, I live in White Oak, and I'd like to invite the council and anyone here to see what it looks like in a community where for 5 years now we've had accessory dwelling units being built in people's backyards, shoddy construction in people's basements, and basically a lack of housing code enforcement by the county in addressing some of this shoddy work that's being done already, which apparently is permitted, but when we report it to the county, they don't seem to be able to address it. It's a problem in the part of the county where our housing stock is 60, 70 years old. We see housing code enforcement problems at the Enclave Apartments in Silver Spring, the Flower Branch apartment explosion, as a result, in my opinion, of lack of code enforcement and lack of ability to take recalcitrant property owners that are not complying with the rental housing rules to court and win in court. So we have to change the laws to be able to have better control over the rental housing stock. And we need, fees to pay for proper code enforcement. And I think those are the things that the county should be looking at if they're looking to expand the rental housing supply. And the other thing I would comment on is I noticed that the map showed that the R200 could go to the medium scale, I believe, and in what you call a special district. And I'm wondering how many units could be built on R200 outside of those special districts, because I think there's a lot of R200 properties around the county that are not in one of those special districts that could provide space for multifamily housing.
Thank you. All right, that was a great comment. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, on the code enforcement, that is something that we are concerned about. I don't think it's directly related to this proposal. Generally, we're talking about much older units where the code enforcement issues tend to be most significant, both in multifamily high-rise and mid-rise, and in some of the single-family rental properties that we're seeing. We have had multiple briefings at the county council. It's something that we are pushing as hard as we can. We provided more inspectors to the executive branch. I know they are concerned about it as well. There's several members of the county executives team who are here. We're happy to follow up if you have specific instances. So feel free to share with us those specific addresses, and we can follow up as well as with the executive branch.
Thank you, Council President.
And just to clarify on the R200, the only recommendation for R200 is the small scale. So this is the duplexes and the triplexes. But the recommendation from the planning board is to allow duplexes everywhere by right, but only triplexes and quadplexes within that priority housing district. So showing you here, the R200 is the lightest yellow. So this is more of what you see up here is R200. It wouldn't be the medium scale that was talked about here. The medium scale is only in the R60 and R90 along those corridors.
Thank you for that. Okay. So we're gonna, I saw your hand here, and I'm gonna make my way on that side of the room. You can go ahead and stand. I'll hold this for you, okay? And your name and where you live in the county.
Sure. My name is William, and I live in Germantown. And so many different ways to go with this. Everybody's so passionate, and that's wonderful that people are participating. So kind of a cautionary tale. What I love about Montgomery County is the schools. Everybody is really proud of the schools, and I'm kind of cautionary tale. I'm not from here. I'm from an area called Westchester County, New York, New Rochelle. And so I'm down here because I was kind of looking at the population of Westchester County, which is really similar to Montgomery County. And between 1970 and 2020, the population went from 800,000 to 950,000, right? Westchester County. So there's a concerted effort to kind of keep the population pretty low. The result is I'm down here. So as proud as they are of their schools, there's a lot of brain drain. And so kind of the pride that people have in Montgomery County schools, there are so many other communities that are willing to take the kids to graduate and leave and can't afford to live in the same community, right? So my kids will stay down here. We go visit New York every once in a while, but we won't go back. And so kind of thinking about long term, because it's not necessarily, it's for us, but we're not really planning for us. It's for, 2050. So I say yes to all of it, kind of within its limits, maybe even a lottery system on who can do a duplex or triplex based on, a vote. So, I love the passion. I just wanted to say that there's yes, but with limits. But you definitely want to refrain from, so the gentleman moved from Chicago, but there's a chance where in some cases you will kind of lose a lot of the things that you invested in here to go to other places like Alexandria, Frederick County. That's going to soon be a really expensive place to live. So.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, I'll make my way back over here. I saw a hand over here for a very long time. So I'll hold this for you, sir, and your name and where you live in the county.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Doug Ryan. My wife and I have lived in Montgomery County since 1997 and in Bethesda since 2003. But more importantly, I think I've worked in affordable housing and home ownership my entire life, my entire adult life, which I know, trust me, that's a really long time. That said, I also worked for HOC, the Housing Opportunities Commission, for 13 years, and I worked on I oversaw fair housing, resident compliance, and regulatory compliance. And I've heard a lot of the concerns in this room over those 13 years, and I get them, and it's really important to have these conversations continue to help assuage them. Most of our neighbors are good people. Most of our future neighbors will be good people. In this program, if it moves forward, which I hope it does, and in the other programs that both of you have mentioned that are so important and underfunded, but oversubscribed. We need more of this. And I will say furthermore, though, that there's lots of thank you. There's lots of good examples that the director talked about other jurisdictions that are doing similar things. So for example, in Durham, North Carolina, when they changed their lots to allow more small lot development, those units became about 60% of the median home price. Similarly, in Houston, that started that in 2007, about 2/3 of the median home price. And Houston is not Montgomery County, I get that. Neither is Durham, North Carolina, but there are lessons to be learned from the data that exists. We can do better. I've been here since 1997. I want my kids to be able to afford to buy a home. They will not be able to, and they both went to the county school system. Our daughter's about to graduate from college. Our son went to UMD. We're hopeful. You give me hope. Some of the vocalizations here give me concern. We can do better as a county. I know we can. I really hope this moves forward. I appreciate the time and all that you're doing. I really appreciate your patience too. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. All right, I'm going to make my way back over. I just didn't want to ignore this side of the room. How you doing? How you doing, sir? And I'm going to make my way there. I can hold this for you if you're able. You can stand. And your name and where you live in the county.
Chris Keller. I'm here with Jerry Lee Bennett. We are from Garrett Park, which is down county. We can't make Wednesday's session, but we appreciate your having a variety of listening sessions. Oh, sorry. Okay, we're from down county. We're a down county municipality. We do not have zoning authority, so we would be covered by this. We have no quarrel with the basic concern here. The question is whether AHS is the answer, or even whether, if it's a tool in the toolkit, the unintended consequences don't outweigh the potential benefits. In a small, older community like ours, it was laid out in 1880, before the advent of the automobile. We have small roads on small rights-of-way. A large part of our housing stock was built before requirements for any off-street parking in the county. If we have this, we will have a fourfold increase in population with attendant parking and a 2 to 3-fold increase in impervious surfaces. So my question, if we're to direct it, is how do we cope with the choking of our streets and the choking of our stormwater sewers?
Stormwater along with parking, those are two of the biggest, most consistent concerns that we have heard. It was part of the briefing that we talked about getting additional follow-up on in the 3 briefings that we had at the county council. It's definitely going to be part of the conversation and hear your concern as well as others on it.
Great, thank you. Show of hands, I did see your hand raised. I'll hold this for you. You can step on out. Your name and where you live.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Magnuson, and I live in Waters Landing in Germantown, a wonderful community with a lot of different affordable housing options. The house that I'm concerned about is the house that I grew up in, Bethesda, which I inherited when my mother died. It's a small little post-World War II house off of Old Georgetown Road, near the French International School, on the way to NIH. And that, as I've over the years seen the other residents die, their estates have sold. Of course, they've sold to developers who have come in and built mega mansions. On the little street where I grew up, 6 of the 8 houses are mega mansions, and there are 2 left that are not. I have taken it upon myself to provide affordable housing by keeping my house small. People in the neighborhood think that I'm crazy. They say, why don't you sell? You can get a lot of money for this. It's a tear down anyway. Why are you improving this property? My goal is to be able to continue to, right now my sons are there because they could not afford to live in Montgomery County on their own, but eventually to rent or maybe even eventually to sell to the residents at NIH or the nurses working at Suburban or the people working at the French International School who cannot afford the $2.5 million houses that are now towering over my little post-World War II house. I just spent a lot of money planting large trees to block the monstrosity that's right next to me that is too huge for the lot but was allowed to be developed. So and the concern that I have, because I do understand the problem, obviously I'm trying to provide affordable housing. My concern is the street already has so much parking that if an emergency vehicle tried to get through, someone would be out of luck. Old Georgetown Road is a mess, and it has one lane that's now been blocked off by white pillars for some reason, I'm not sure what it is. Bikes, schools. You know, what are you doing for the infrastructure to support all these additional people that are going to come into the triplexes and the duplexes? I mean, it's already a quality of life issue, which has been repeated by many people here. So I have an idea, and you're not going to like it. It's probably insane, but what about providing tax credits to those people who are willing to keep their houses small? You know, $8,000 for a little post-World War house. You save me that $8,000, tax the $2.5 million houses that can afford it, and I'll be able to provide affordable housing.
We do charge recordation taxes. The recordation taxes are progressive and do charge additional over certain thresholds, so those larger tear-down houses do pay considerably more on that. I did have a proposal, I will say, on older adult senior property tax credit. Unfortunately, it was tabled because of some concerns of colleagues that would have reduced from 40 years living in a house to 25 years. You do have to be a homeowner to receive the tax credit. There's virtually no property tax credit that we provide or any jurisdiction in Maryland that I'm aware provides to an absentee landlord of a property, nor do I think that that would be permissible under state law. But the idea that you're talking about is something that we are looking at, and I'm hopeful that we can take back up that older adult property tax credit in a slightly different form, but to achieve part of what you're talking about, because it is a major issue.
Great. Thank you for that, Council President. Yes, sir. I'll hold this for you. You can tell me your name and where you live.
Richard Pavlin. I'm with Action in Montgomery, which supports the attainable housing. And I've lived in Montgomery County for over 50 years, starting as a renter in Tacoma Park, had a condo in Silver Spring, had a townhouse in Gaithersburg, and I now live in Potomac, where everybody knows what the cost of housing is there. So I've lived through all of this rental costs and living costs, and like you, know that it's very expensive. I think what this proposal does is it solves a problem of the type of housing, as they've said, that we lack. And the congregations that belong to Action in Montgomery, many of them are up-county congregations, they're for this because they know their kids can't afford to live here. And these smaller units are ideal for the workforce who are younger career owners or career respondents who come in, low salaries, can't afford to live here, and wind up asking their parents to live with them, or they have to get a roommate and find out somebody who could afford to share the cost with them. I think the question that I have is that we understand there are 17,000 abandoned homes in Montgomery County. These homes may be the great opportunity many developers are looking for to put up housing. Has that been considered in the gentrification study, which I applaud the Planning Board for doing? Have they looked at the 17,000 abandoned homes that could be part of that study to make it a more complete study, give it a better analysis? The other thing I think that we're looking at is the income of those people who are able to afford housing right now, why are we allowing them to not be able to somehow support that program that you contribute to when you build the house and you have to pay into the Housing Initiative Fund? It's at 1%. Why couldn't it be more? I'm sorry, it's at 5%. Why a 0.5%? Why couldn't it be more that the builder of these units has to pay as a payment for the Housing Initiative Fund?
I think you're referring to the recordation tax that's collected. Part of the proceeds of the recordation tax go into the Housing Initiative Fund, which pays for affordable housing. Part of it goes into rental assistance. A part of it goes generally to county government. We did just significantly increase recordation taxes at the county. There was a debate over how much we should increase it and what should be the starting point. Should it be for homes starting at $600,000 or for homes starting at about $1 million, which, as we saw, is basically the median sales price, the average sales price of a single-family detached. But everybody agreed that we should raise it, and we ultimately did raise it. In terms of the 17,000 units, I don't know if you wanted to quickly turn it to Lisa Gavoni, but I want to be mindful of time here.
No, I would just say I don't know, but that's something we'll try to get a better understanding of.
Great,
we'll
thank
follow
you.
up on that. I
Thank
think we
you.
have time for 3 more questions.
3 more questions. Okay, I did see your hand raised, sir, so you can go ahead and stand, and I will try to make my way around, okay? I'll hold that for you, okay? Thank you. Your name and where you live in the county.
Paul Jarasinski. I'm the president of the Cherrywood Homeowners Association in Albany, Maryland. The one person we didn't hear from tonight was the county executive. We heard 40 minutes from you guys. The county executive has labeled this plan fiscally and environmentally irresponsible. And he said the level of deception from the planning board has been unprecedented. A lot of your numbers that you're using are outdated numbers. They're manipulation of statistics, and there's many gratuitous assumptions in your plan. It throws out 4 decades of master plans for all the communities. It affects 134,000 homes in Montgomery County. I live in a planned community. We have MPDUs, we have condos, we have single-family homes. We were planned that way. This plan is a destructive plan. It throws out everything that was planned for the last 4 decades and says, we're going to start over and do something else. People have talked about getting more tax money. The planning board actually applied at the PHP meeting on 7/22 for a 75% reduction for the redevelopers on their property tax for 10 years for redeveloping single-family homes. They also want to give them interest-free loans for a year. Funded by taxpayers. They want to give grants to the people who build these homes. So this isn't like fair to the people. You're going to be paying more taxes if you're left than the people that redevelop your home around you. We do need, the Council of Governments has said we do need more affordable housing, and that is needed in housing. All you got to do is look at DC. DC is currently converting their empty office space to affordable housing. The Council of Governments says that's where we need to have our houses built in urban areas near transit hubs and other amenities so people don't need a car. In Montgomery County, we have 20% of our office space is vacant. In Silver Spring, it's 25 to 29%. These are ideal places where the county can convert empty office space into affordable housing for people and give them a place to live. As far as your other point, and the last point, is to give people more choices for houses to build. This lady over here mentioned that we have large plots of land throughout the county. Lake Forest Mall, Burtonsville Shopping Center, Viva White Oak, the Geico site, the Vitro site. These are places where you can actually build your complete communities from the ground up. You can put all the proper infrastructure in place at the time you do the buildings, rather than go back and take all the single-family houses and double or triple the density in those houses that's built on insufficient infrastructure to withhold those. And I'm not suggesting a pilot program. I understand other people have suggested a pilot program to pick a community or two to throw under the bus. I'm saying develop these empty plots, offer these other things, show you can build proof of concept, show you can build a complete community. And if people flock to these, then go ahead and build more. But go ahead and give us a proof of concept somewhere where this actually works.
Thank you for that, sir. Okay. Excuse me. I'm going to make my way over. We have a time for maybe 2 more questions. I did see
If
your
we could
hand.
try to be brief with the last couple comments, we
Yes.
might be able to get one more in.
So your name very quick and where you live in the county.
Yeah, hi, I'm Pam, and I live in Gaithersburg. I'd like to have a show of hands or have people stand up if you do not work for the county. Seriously, I need to know, who does not work for the county? Stand up or raise your hands. Okay? Who does not also, so then look around. If you see people sitting down, they may have something to gain from this, okay? So you have to think about follow the money, okay? Because you work for the county, or you've worked for the county. So I think you just need to sit down. So anyway, who knows this, thank you so much. Who knows this, this ad slogan? We've come a long way, baby. Who can shout that out? Where'd that come from? Anybody know? Say it loud. Virginia Slims. Okay. We have come a long way, but we are going backwards really fast if the council decides to go with this plan for the numerous reasons that have already been mentioned. And I will agree with the HOA guy over here. You've got some, show proof of concept, show this stuff. I agree with the guy from Chicago. I agree with the guy from New York. People come here for certain reasons. Who decides, who thinks they want to live in a utopia with a 3 or 4 unit house next door after the guy from Germantown paid $800,000 to live in his nice house with green space and all these things? Who thinks this is utopia, and who thinks this is a bait and switch? Okay, when you buy your property, you think, hey, I'm gonna have a safe neighborhood. So when I was single and I lived in Silver Spring and was a victim of violent crime in that apartment complex at Strathmore House on Belpre Road, and the victim of numerous crimes by being there because of the high density. People don't know each other. They have no investment. When you have no investment, you have high crime. You have people who don't know each other. And when you have developers that will be able to snap up properties right and left because people will be fleeing Montgomery County, and so many have already done that. I know too many.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to have to move on. Do we have time for maybe one more?
2 more.
2 more? Okay. 2 more. Okay. I'm going to make my way over
As she's
here.
walking over, I did want to thank the PIO team who has been working hard, is working late, the Recreation Department. Thank you to the council staff. Thank you to colleagues who are here, and the planning board.
Great. Thank you. Your name, I'll hold this for you, and where you live in the county.
My name is Liz Cordy, and I live in Germantown, Maryland. In Waters Landing, like some of the other people here. And I have 2 questions. One is I have yet to see the actual statistics or proposed statistics for how this is going to create more affordable housing for people who need affordable housing or missing middle housing. That's number 1. And the second is what is the path to legislation at this point?
Yeah, I'll speak to the path to legislation. Something has to be introduced, and then the formal legislative process begins there. We aren't even at the point of formal legislation being before the council. As I mentioned before, we're doing unprecedented public outreach. We had the 3 briefings at the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee in July. We're doing these series of listening sessions throughout the county. Ultimately, if and when there is legislation before the council, be introduced at the council at a public session, and then it would go to the committee. Then it would have public hearings as part of that, a public hearing as part of that, as part of the legislative process. Then it has to go to the full council and ultimately has to be approved at the full council. So there is a formal legislative process that has to happen. The formal legislative process hasn't even started. It includes introduction, it then includes public hearing, then includes committee work session, or work sessions, most likely, and then it includes full council work sessions and ultimately full council votes. So there are many steps here before we move anything forward, and there's still a question of what we would be moving forward in any legislative vehicle, which is the whole reason why we're here tonight and have been in communities across the county.
Great. Looks like we have time for one more quick question. If you can quickly say your name, where you live in the county, and a quick comment.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Lee Bennett, and I also live in Garrett Park, but I'm a former resident of Waters Landing in Germantown. We moved to Garrett Park and purchased a house that is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is a separate contributing property, so it is not part of the Garrett Park Historic District, or it's not within. So while I have to file for a historic area work permit to do anything outside of regular maintenance to my home, I pay extra for everything I do to protect and preserve my home, which I do out of love for the historic nature and character of my community. If someone purchased the house next to me, we're in a priority district because we have a MARC train station. I bought my house because of riding on the MARC station, the MARC train from Germantown to Garrett Park. I saw the beautiful neighborhood and wanted to be there. Because that house next to me is not required to file a historic area work permit, as I understand it, a quadplex could be built next door to me. 8 additional cars could be on the very narrow street in front of my house. Historic preservation doesn't even appear as a phrase in the report from the Planning Board to the County Council. What protections are you going to provide for historic resources in the county?
So thank you for that. The report was really focused on what changes would need to be made to zoning to be able to address what the council asked us to do, which was to try to find ways through zoning to get missing middle housing. The historic, all the rules around historic districts and historic sites would still apply. So, you know, you're not likely to see, if it is a contributing resource or within a district, you're not likely to see that it wouldn't be allowed. It would have to go through the process. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think he missed the main point. The main part on that is we still don't know what is going to be. This is what has been proposed and recommended by the Planning Board. The council's going to have to take up these issues. You raised the question of, you know, what is allowed and what impacts on, you know, historic districts and other dynamics. The house next to you, under current standards, just like the woman who has her mother's home, that could be torn down like many of the homes in her neighborhood could, and would go to be, you know, a large house to the full setback lot coverage standards. And the question is, should something else also be allowed under those circumstances that has the same coverage? And that is part of the conversation and why we're here tonight, listening to your concerns. We hear you on that. We'll make sure that the historic district dynamics are also something that we take up and think through. Parking, infrastructure are certainly ones that we've heard quite a bit about tonight. The HOA question I think I did answer, but that's something that we can ensure is clarified so that it's clear. And there are a number of other issues that have come up. We've had our council team in the back taking notes. Appreciate her, Ms. Nadeau. I have my chief of staff here, Cindy Gibson, who's taking notes as well. As I mentioned, we will follow up with information to share with you from the meeting, whether you registered or whether you signed up and signed in today. Please make sure you did one or the other if you expect to get something from us so that we could communicate well with you. We have upcoming listening session at BCC High School on Wednesday. We have a virtual listening session that's coming up on October 2nd. As mentioned, this is additional public input that we are receiving. We're not required to do. We decided to get additional public input, unprecedented levels of public input so that we could hear your concerns. I really appreciate the variety of viewpoints that we heard tonight. It is reflective of the variety of viewpoints that we have heard at all of the listening sessions up to this point. I appreciate anybody who's willing to show up to a meeting or to reach out to their council members to take ownership and engage in the issues that are impacting their community. So thank you for that. Thank you to Councilmember Balcom and Councilmember Lukey and Councilmember Katz for being here, and all of your teams. Thank you to the Planning Department and the Planning Board and the Planning Board Chair. And thank you especially, and let's hear it for the Rec Department who put up with us coming here and is staying late for us. Thank you to the PIO team, the council staff. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We're going to ask that as this meeting wraps up, that you make your way out as quickly as possible so that we can clean up and get the folks who are working really hard here at the rec department home. So thank you so much. Be safe and really appreciate you joining us tonight.